This is one of those situations that didn't build slowly, it erupted. Within hours, the entire tone online shifted from casual scrolling to full-blown shock, confusion, and non-stop speculation. Names started trending everywhere. Screens filled with reposts, screenshots, and unverified claims that nobody could fully trace back to a single source. At the center of it all, two names kept repeating: Boosie Pooh Shiesty, pulled into a wave of viral discussion that spread faster than facts could even catch up. And the most important detail: no confirmation, no official statement, no verified report. Just momentum. And on the internet, momentum is sometimes all it takes for a story to explode. It started with posts, fragmented claims, vague accusations, and attention-grabbing captions that hinted at something bigger going on behind the scenes. At first, people treated it like noise, just another rumor cycle. But then something changed. The posts didn't stop. They multiplied. Different accounts, different pages, slightly different versions of the same claim, and with every repost the story became less specific, but more dramatic. That's how online narratives evolve. They don't stay stable, they expand to fill in missing information. And here the gaps were wide. Some posts suggested legal developments. Others implied consequences already unfolding quietly behind closed doors. A few even hinted at outcomes that sounded final, settled, decided, already done. But none of it came with proof. No documents, no verified sources, no direct confirmations from anyone officially connected. Just repetition. And repetition online has power, because once enough people repeat something, it starts to feel real, even when it isn't fully understood. That's when the situation turned. People stopped just reading, they started reacting. Old clips resurfaced. Interviews were rewatched. Past headlines were pulled back into circulation and reinterpreted through the lens of the current rumor wave. Moments that had nothing to do with the new claims were suddenly being connected anyway. And once that starts happening, the line between fact and interpretation begins to disappear. Everything starts feeling linked, even when it's not. That's what makes viral speculation so dangerous. It doesn't need confirmation to grow. It just needs attention. And attention came fast. Within hours, comment sections turned into debate zones. Some users were convinced something serious had happened. Others pushed back hard, calling it another case of the internet running ahead of reality. But the most powerful reaction wasn't belief or disbelief. It was confusion. Because the biggest thing missing from the entire situation was clarity. No direct denial. No official clarification. No statement to ground the narrative. And in that silence, the internet did what it always does. It filled the space. With theories. With assumptions. With worst-case interpretations. Because silence, especially during a viral moment, never feels neutral online. It feels suspicious, even when it is. And that's when the questions started multiplying. What's actually going on? Why is this spreading so fast? And why hasn't anything been confirmed or denied clearly? Those questions became louder than the original claims themselves. And once that shift happens, the story is no longer about what was posted. It becomes about what's missing. Meanwhile, both Boosie and Pooh Shiesty's public identities added fuel to the fire. Boosie has long been a figure surrounded by controversy, known for outspoken opinions, unfiltered commentary, and a public presence that keeps him constantly in discussion. That kind of visibility means anything attached to his name spreads quickly, sometimes faster than it can be verified. On the other hand, Pooh Shiesty has spent recent years navigating legal headlines and public scrutiny, which already places his name in a sensitive context online. When someone is already associated with legal narratives, the internet often connects new rumors to old situations automatically, even without evidence. So when both names appeared together in viral claims, the reaction was immediate. Not because anything was confirmed, but because the internet recognized the combination as attention-worthy. And attention is what drives escalation. From there, the situation stopped being about one post or one claim. It became a layered wave of interpretations. Each new user added their own angle. Each repost added new emotion. Each comment section became a separate version of the story. And the more it spread, the less anyone could agree on what the original claim even was. That's the point where online narratives become unstable. Because truth requires structure, sources, confirmation, context. But viral stories survive on fragments. And fragments are easy to reshape. At the same time, something else made the situation even more intense: timing. The claims didn't arrive in isola. Tian, they appeared during a moment when audiences were already highly active, already tuned into similar discussions, already primed for controversy. And when attention is already high, even weak information can feel explosive. That's how viral cycles accelerate. Not because everything is true, but because everything feels urgent. And urgency spreads faster than accuracy. As the situation continued, a second wave of reactions emerged, this time focusing less on the claims themselves and more on the lack of response. Why hasn't there been a clear statement? Why hasn't anything been addressed directly? Is silence strategy or coincidence? Those questions created a new layer of speculation, one that didn't depend on the original rumor at all. It focused entirely on the absence of reaction. And that absence became its own kind of narrative. But beneath all of this, a deeper reality was forming. Most people weren't reacting to confirmed information. They were reacting to interpretation loops, where speculation, reposts, and assumptions reinforced each other until the story felt established, even without proof. And that's what makes this kind of viral situation so unstable. Because once perception takes over, facts struggle to catch up. Right now, the situation sits exactly in that space. Between claim and confirmation. Between rumor and reality. Between what was said and what was actually verified. And as long as that gap remains open, the story will keep evolving. Because online, unfinished stories don't fade. They escalate until something breaks the cycle, either clarity or correction. And until that happens, this remains exactly what it is. A viral storm built on fragments, moving faster than certainty can follow. Within hours, everything escalated beyond anyone's control. What started as scattered posts and unverified claims had now turned into a full-scale internet phenomenon. Bigger pages picked it up. Larger audiences entered the conversation. And suddenly, this wasn't just a rumor anymore. It was a trending global debate unfolding in real time. Because once major accounts started reposting the story, the tone shifted completely. It was allegedly anymore in how people were speaking. It became "this happened," "that was said," "this is confirmed," even though nothing official had actually changed. And that's where things crossed a dangerous line, where repetition started replacing verification. Now Boosie and Pooh Shiesty weren't just names in a viral thread. They were the center of a storm they didn't publicly respond to, but somehow couldn't escape. Every timeline, every comment section, every discussion board kept pulling them deeper into a narrative that kept expanding with or without proof. And the more silence continued, the louder the internet became. Because silence in moments like this is never neutral. To some people, it looked like confirmation. To others, it looked like confusion. But to the algorithm-driven world of social media, it looked like fuel. Every unanswered question became a new theory. Every lack of statement became a new interpretation, and every interpretation became another wave of content. Then came the shift that truly changed everything. People stopped asking, "Is this real?" and started saying, "This is what happened." That one psychological switch is what turned uncertainty into belief. Once a claim becomes repeated enough times, it starts feeling like fact, even without evidence. And that's exactly what began happening across platforms. Clips resurfaced. Old interviews were dragged back into circulation. Past headlines were reinterpreted under a new lens. Suddenly, moments that once had no connection were being stitched together like pieces of a puzzle. And even if they didn't actually fit, the internet forced them to. A short interview here, a vague comment there, a headline from years ago. All of it started forming a narrative that felt complete, but only because people were determined to complete it. And that's when the situation took a darker turn. Because once narratives become complete online, they become resistant to correction. Even when new information appears, it struggles to break through the version people already believe. And right now, two completely different realities were forming side by side. In one version, Boosie and Pooh Shiesty were at the center of something serious that was finally being exposed. In the other version, the entire situation was a misunderstanding, amplified, distorted, and pushed beyond recognition by online speculation. Neither side had full proof, but both sides were fully convinced. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, something even more noticeable was happening: digital silence. Accounts that once engaged suddenly went quiet. Interactions disappeared. Posts were deleted or archived. Not official statements, just absence. And that absence only added more fuel to the fire. Because in the world of online celebrity culture, people don't just notice what is said, they notice what suddenly is. And that gap became the perfect space for speculation to grow. Then came another wave. One post, one claim, one line that spread faster than everything else combined. That there was more to the story, more information, more context, more footage. Something unseen that could either confirm the viral narrative or completely destroy it. No proof, no source, just implication. But in today's digital environment, implication is often enough. The reaction was immediate. Panic posts, reaction videos, breakdown threads, people refreshing timelines like something was about to drop at any moment. The energy shifted from discussion to anticipation. Because now, the story wasn't just about what had been said. It was about what might still come out. And that uncertainty is what pushed everything into overdrive. But amid all of this chaos, a quieter layer of the situation started emerging: analysis. Not emotional reaction, but observation. Some users began pointing out inconsistencies in the viral posts. Different versions of the story didn't match. Timelines conflicted. Details changed depending on who was sharing them. And for the first time, doubt started breaking through the noise. People began asking for receipts, screenshots, full clips, verified sources. And slowly, the narrative that had been building at lightning speed started showing cracks. Because when attention is high but evidence is low, stories start collapsing under their own weight. Still, even with growing skepticism, the momentum didn't stop. If anything, it split the audience further. One group doubled down, insisting that the lack of clarity itself proved something bigger was being hidden. The other group pushed back, calling it exaggeration and digital misinformation spiraling out of control. Same story, two completely different interpretations, and both sides growing louder. Meanwhile, Boosie and Pooh Shiesty remained publicly silent. No joint statement, no clarification, no confirmation. And that silence kept the cycle alive, because the internet doesn't pause for answers. It fills gaps with imagination. Every hour that passed added more layers, more theories, more reposted content, more emotional reactions. The situation was no longer contained to one platform. It had become a cross-platform wave of speculation that kept feeding itself. And then came the most critical shift yet. People stopped asking what happened and started asking who benefits. Because when a story grows this fast, this wide, this emotionally charged, attention itself becomes part of the equation. Suddenly, users began questioning timing, motivation, and amplification. Why now? Why these accounts? Why this framing? And that's when the conversation stopped being just about two artists and started becoming about how narratives are built online in the first place. Because whether the original claims were true, partially true, or completely misinterpreted, one fact remained undeniable. The internet had already transformed them into something much bigger than their origin. And once that happens, control becomes almost impossible to regain. Right now, the situation is still unfolding. No confirmed resolution, no final statement, no clear ending. Just noise, speculation, and anticipation building toward whatever comes next. And the most unsettling part, everyone feels like the next update is already on its way. Within hours, the internet didn't just pick up the story, it swallowed it whole. What started as scattered posts and unverified claims had now evolved into a full-scale digital storm. Timelines were no longer calm spaces for scrolling. They had turned into live battlegrounds of opinion, emotion, and speculation. Every refresh brought new clips, new breakdowns, new interpretations. And at the center of it all were two names that kept getting repeated: Boosie and Pooh Shiesty. At first, it was confusion, people trying to understand where the claims even came from. Then it shifted into reaction, shock, disbelief, anger, and then something more dangerous, certainty, even without proof. Because once enough people start repeating something, the internet has a way of turning uncertainty into narrative. And that's exactly what happened here. The original claims were never clearly verified. There was no official statement, no confirmed report, no document that grounded the conversation in fact. Just posts, screenshots, threads, and a wave of accounts pushing slightly different versions of the same idea. Some hinted at legal trouble, others implied something far more serious. A few went even further, suggesting outcomes that had never been confirmed anywhere else. But none of it slowed the spread. If anything, the lack of clarity fueled it. And that's when the situation changed. Because people stopped asking where it came from and started asking what it meant. Old clips resurfaced. Past interviews were pulled apart line by line. Moments thawed. Once had no significance were suddenly being treated like evidence. Every pause in a video became a clue. Every old quote became a prediction. Every rumor from the past was reinterpreted as if it had always been pointing here. And once that happens, reality stops being the anchor. Perception takes over. Boosie, already known for his outspoken nature and controversial takes, became an easy focal point for speculation. Pooh Shiesty, already tied to legal headlines in public memory, became the other half of a narrative people were quick to build. Separately, they were public figures with complicated histories. Together, in the middle of viral chaos, they became something else entirely, symbols inside a story the internet was writing in real time. But what turned speculation into wildfire wasn't evidence. It was repetition. Posts began showing up with more confidence than clarity. No questions, no hesitation, just statements framed like facts. And on the internet, certainty spreads faster than truth ever does. Soon, people weren't saying apparently anymore. They were saying this happened. And that shift changed everything. Because once a claim starts being treated as reality, the reaction becomes immediate and emotional. People don't pause to verify. They respond. They argue. They take sides. And that's exactly what unfolded next. One group demanded answers, convinced something serious was being exposed. Another group pushed back, calling it misinformation. saying the entire situation was being inflated beyond recognition. And in the middle of that divide, the original facts, whatever they were, started disappearing under layers of interpretation. But the most powerful accelerant in the entire situation wasn't even the claims themselves. It was silence. No clear, immediate response. No official correction. No direct shutdown of the narrative. And in the vacuum that followed, the internet did what it always does. It filled the silence with theories. For some, that silence meant confirmation. For others, it meant irrelevance. Same absence of information, two completely opposite conclusions, and that contradiction kept the cycle alive. Meanwhile, engagement skyrocketed. Bigger pages picked up the story. Commentary accounts began breaking it down frame by frame. Reaction videos multiplied. Every platform became part of the amplification loop. The more it was discussed, the more visible it became. And the more visible it became, the more real it felt, even to people who had doubts. But then, a new layer entered the conversation. A quieter one at first. A growing suggestion that the original claims might not have been entirely accurate, not necessarily false, but distorted, misunderstood, taken from one context and stretched into another. That possibility shifted the tone again, introducing doubt back into a space that had already moved far past hesitation. And once doubt returns, everything gets reevaluated. People began rewatching clips, rereading posts, searching for inconsistencies, timing issues, missing context, gaps in logic. The same content that once fueled certainty was now being used to question it. But even that didn't settle things. Because while one side started pulling back, calling it exaggerated or misinterpreted, the other side doubled down harder. New claims appeared. New details were added to the story. Not verified, but repeated often enough to keep momentum alive. And just like that, the internet split, not into truth and lies, but into belief systems. Two versions of reality forming from the same fragments. Behind the scenes, something else started happening too. Posts began disappearing. Comments were deleted. Accounts that once amplified the story went quiet, not publicly explained, not officially acknowledged, but noticed. And in digital culture, silence after noise is never ignored, it's analyzed. That only added more fuel to the confusion. Because now people weren't just asking what happened. They were asking why things were being removed, and whether that meant the story was real or simply getting out of control. Then came the next wave of claims. Suggestions that more information might exist, additional context, missing pieces, unreleased details, enough to suggest that what people had been reacting to was not the full picture, but only a fragment of something larger. And that idea changed the entire direction of the conversation again. Because if more context exists, then every interpretation so far is incomplete. And if everything is incomplete, then certainty collapses again. What remains is uncertainty, amplified by attention. At this point, Boosie and Pooh Shiesty are no longer just names in a headline. They are anchors for a narrative that keeps expanding beyond itself. Whether they've responded or not, whether they've even acknowledged the situation publicly, doesn't matter anymore in the viral cycle. Their silence, their presence, their history, all of it is being interpreted in real time. And that's where things stand now. Not resolved, not confirmed, still moving, still evolving. Because the truth in situations like this doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in fragments, through posts, reactions, corrections, and contradictions, until eventually the noise either collapses under its own weight or gets replaced by something undeniable. But right now, the internet is still in the middle of that process. And nobody is waiting quietly anymore. And according to that new wave of claims, the situation may not be as random as people first believed. Not just a misunderstanding that spiraled out of control, not just a case of the internet running ahead of itself, but something more structured underneath it all. Something that started small, then expanded step by step, until it became impossible to separate fact from reaction. Because if you trace it back, every viral moment follows the same pattern. A small claim appears, it gets reposted, then it gets reworded, then it gets amplified, and by the time it reaches the wider audience, it no longer looks like what it originally was. It looks bigger, heavier, more serious than the starting point ever suggested. And that's exactly what people are now questioning. Was this situation ever fully clear in the first place? Or did it grow in layers of interpretation until the original context got lost completely? Because right now, there are two realities existing at the same time. One based on what people believe they saw, and another based on what can actually be verified. And the gap between those two is where the entire internet debate is sitting. Meanwhile, Boosie and Pooh Shiesty remain at the center of it all. Not necessarily because of confirmed developments, but because their names are now tied to the conversation itself. And in the world of viral media, that alone is enough to keep something alive far longer than expected. Every repost, every reaction, every breakdown adds another layer. Even uncertainty becomes fuel. And the more uncertain it gets, the more people engage with it, trying to solve something that may not even have a single clear version. But here's where the situation takes another turn. Because while the internet keeps arguing, a quieter pattern has started to emerge in the background. People stepping away from posts, threads disappearing, accounts going silent that were previously active in pushing the story forward. Not a full shutdown, not an official correction, just a subtle withdrawal that people are noticing but no one is fully explaining. And in situations like this, silence becomes its own kind of message. Some interpret it as confirmation that something is being handled privately. Others see it as proof that the story was never solid to begin with. Same behavior, two completely opposite conclusions. That's what makes this so unstable. And now, as the conversation stretches further, another layer has been added. The idea that this entire situation might not just be about what was said, but how quickly it was believed. Because once a claim reaches a certain speed online, it stops being just information. It becomes momentum, and momentum doesn't need proof to keep moving. It only needs attention. That's why even users who are now skeptical admit they saw it when it first started trending and felt something was off, but still watched it unfold anyway. Because once a story is everywhere, it becomes harder to ignore than to question. And that's the core tension right now. Not just what is true, but what has already been accepted as true by large groups of people. At the same time, speculation about a possible clarification continues to circulate. Some say a response is coming. Others say it already exists but hasn't been widely seen. Nothing confirmed, nothing official, just anticipation building on top of uncertainty. And that anticipation alone is enough to keep engagement high. Because now the internet isn't just reacting to a story. It's waiting for a correction that may or may not arrive. And if it does arrive, the next question becomes even more complicated. Will it actually reset the narrative, or will it simply become another layer in the same cycle? That's the part people don't talk about enough. Once a viral story reaches this stage, correction doesn't erase it. It competes with it. And usually, the first version people saw is the one that stays strongest in memory, even if later information contradicts it. So even if everything gets clarified, the impact has already been locked in. Names have already been attached to emotions. Interpretations have already been shared millions of times. Debates have already split audiences into opposing sides. And that structure doesn't disappear just because new information arrives later. It evolves again. And that's what makes this moment so unpredictable. Because right now, the situation is suspended between three things at once: what was claimed, what was assumed, and what may still be revealed. And all three are competing for attention at the same time. No single version fully dominates. No single explanation fully closes the conversation. And in that space, the story keeps breathing on its own, expanding, shifting, repeating. And as long as there's uncertainty, there will be more interpretations, more theories, more attempts to make sense of something that refuses to settle into one clear shape. So now the real focus isn't just on Boosie or Pooh Shiesty anymore. It's on how quickly the internet turns fragments into narratives, and narratives into something that feels like fact before it ever is confirmed. And whether this situation turns out to be major, minor, or completely misread in the end, one thing is already undeniable. The reaction itself has become the story. And that's why everyone is still watching, waiting, because whatever comes next isn't just another update. It's the moment that decides which version of this story survives. According to some users, what sparked this entire wave of chaos may not even belong to the context it's being tied to now. Instead, it may have started as something completely different, something small, something ordinary, that slowly got reshaped, reposted, and reframed until it no longer resembled the original moment at all. And if that's true, then everything that followed, the reactions, the outrage, the viral breakdowns, was built on a foundation that may have shifted without anyone realizing it. That's where things start to get uncomfortable, because it suggests the story didn't simply grow, it transformed into something louder, sharper, more dramatic than what it ever originally was. But even as that idea starts circulating, the situation itself doesn't slow down. If anything, it accelerates. More clips are shared, more interpretations appear, more people jump in, each one adding their own version of what they think is happening. And just like that, the line between fact and assumption begins to blur completely. At the center of all of this, names like Boosie and Pooh Shiesty continue to dominate the conversation. Not because there's clarity, but because there is. And in moments like this, uncertainty becomes fuel. The less people know, the more they speculate. The more they speculate, the faster it spreads. Then comes the shift that changes everything again. Because as confusion builds online, attention starts turning towards something else entirely, the idea of a response. People begin waiting, watching, refreshing feeds, not for confirmation of what's already been said, but for someone, anyone, to finally address it directly. A statement, a clarification, a denial, something solid enough to either lock the narrative in place or break it apart completely. But here's the problem. By the time silence stretches long enough, it starts speaking for itself. Some interpret it as confirmation. Others see it as proof that the situation is being exaggerated. The same silence creates two completely opposite stories, both feeling equally real to the people believing them. And while that tension builds, another layer enters the conversation. Some users begin suggesting that the original situation may have been taken from a completely different context altogether, reshaped just enough to fit a more viral, more emotionally charged narrative. If that's the case, then what people are reacting to isn't the original moment anymore. It's a version of it, edited, reinterpreted, amplified through repetition until it becomes something else entirely. That realization shifts everything again. Because now the discussion isn't just about what happened. It's about how easily something can become unrecognizable once it enters the internet's cycle of reposts, reactions, and assumptions. Still, the story continues moving, still spreading, still evolving in real time. And that's what makes this moment so unstable. It's not finished. It's not resolved. It's still being written by millions of people at once, each refresh adding another layer. And now everyone is waiting for the same thing. The moment that breaks the cycle. The response that either confirms everything or shuts it all down. But even that won't guarantee clarity, because once a narrative spreads this far, truth alone doesn't always reset it. People hold onto first impressions. Emotions stick longer than corrections, and perception becomes its own kind of reality. So the question now isn't just what is true. It's what people will choose to believe when the answer finally arrives. And when that moment comes, it won't just end the conversation. It will redefine it.